Every once in a long while, a series or movie manages to create a captivating cosmic horror story, with Archive 81 being the most recent example of this. While far from perfect, it's certainly above average, as it weaves a familiar Lovecraftian mystery without losing a beat. As such, it's going to be the focus of today's Worth Watching Episode 2, as this show is definitely worth your time. The story of Archive 81 follows a familiar outline to Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, insofar as it's essentially a detective story revolving around a mysterious cult that happens to worship some kind of elder god. The further the plot progresses, the more of the dark mystery is unraveled as the protagonists step further into madness. The unique twist on the Lovecraftian formula in this case is that Archive 81 follows two detective protagonists spanning two different timelines, one being in the present day with Dan, an antisocial retro media restorationist, and the other being Melody, a documentary filmmaker in 1994 who was investigating a creepy old building in New York City, later destroyed by a suspicious fire. While there were no survivors of the inferno, Melody's tapes managed to be salvaged, with Dan then being tasked to restore them inside a clandestine facility in present-day upstate New York. As Dan restores one VHS tape after another, he discovers the truth of what Melody had uncovered. An esoteric cult operating out of the basement of the building was planning to summon their dark god, Calago, as a comet from the depths of the cosmos passed by the Earth. Things, of course, get stranger and stranger in an ever-escalating, unrelenting assault on the senses as the story approaches its climax. While Archive 81 is very much a beat-for-beat reimagining of standard Lovecraftian tropes, it does so in such an elegant way, with such darkness and dread soaked into each and every scene, that it propels you to continue watching until all of the mystery has been revealed. While the first episode or two is very much a slow burn, the conclusions to each episode are so compelling and bizarre that you just can't look away. It manages to distinguish itself with an interesting story, regardless of whether or not you're familiar with the Lovecraftian outline. The show does something very clever with how it handles the cult, as it revolves around a three-note melody they hypnotically chant over and over again. This audible cue creates such a dissonance that it overtly enhances their perceived malice, and reminds me significantly of an old French black metal band, Movat. Eerie is the best way to describe it, but the fact that the melody is woven into other aspects of the story really elevates this incarnation over the standard fare cultists typically encountered in stories such as these. Archive 81 also manages to give them a fairly decent backstory, through either the use of ancient grimoires indicating that the cult dates back hundreds of years, to their resurgence in the early 20th century during the actual historic era of the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, seances, and spirit photography. There's an added sense of legitimacy given to the motivations of the cult because it seems like exactly the kind of secret society that would have come to prominence and garnered a following in the 1920s. These kinds of stories always require a great antagonist in order to be compelling, and Archive 81 delivers this in spades. When it comes to the conclusion, it wouldn't be cosmic horror if it had a happy ending, and thankfully Archive 81 is well aware of this. While the Elder God might get a little more screen time than some purists would like, it still gets less than a minute of screen time in total, which is just enough. It's not overdone, and there's just enough scene without it getting hokey. The show also makes a really great decision in the final episode to barely show when Dan crosses over to the other dimension, and instead has the old one manifest as figures such as Dan's father in order to convince him to stay. By creating a world of illusions to further push the protagonist towards madness, Archive 81 wraps up its story in the only way it should, in utter and complete ambiguity. While some folks think traditional time travel was involved, where somehow Dan is stuck in the past at the conclusion of the story, I instead believe he's trapped in the shadow dimension. The show never indicated that physically traversing time was possible, rather that, thanks to the Resident Evil style mold being present in both locations of the two protagonists across the two timelines, that the Elder God was able to bridge both timelines, allowing Dan and Melody to communicate through dreams. Considering that Melody was trapped in a dimension as time progressed linearly outside of it, I'm therefore assuming Dan is still in the dimension as we never see him leave it. If he is actually in another timeline, the show should have illustrated that he escaped the dimension for that to be feasible, along with the notion of multiple timelines, as we're only ever presented with one. The implications of Dan and Melody's communications were also fascinating conceptually, with one of my favorite moments being the seance, and how the playback on the tape stops so Dan and Melody can speak, only for the medium to recite Dan's words verbatim once the playback resumes. There are a lot of good ideas that are executed very well in Archive 81. Enough to say that I was pretty blown away by the time the final credits rolled. It managed to persist a true sense of dread throughout the entirety of the show, and only ever became a darker and more maddening, twisted mess as the story went on. Another reason I'm so impressed with this show is because of how infrequent good cosmic horror comes along. The only other episodic series that might qualify in the past decade would be True Detective Season 1, but even that only glimpsed at cosmic horror and never personified it to the degree within Archive 81. As far as cosmic horror movies are concerned, we've got recent flops like Color Out of Space, which was just so mediocre. To find anything remotely comparable, we have to go all the way back to the 90s for films like In the Mouth of Madness and Event Horizon. I suppose that's in part because cosmic horror is just such a difficult style to nail down or handle with any tact in order to not come off as either campy or incredibly cheesy, ruining the theme outright. At least in this case, Archive 81 makes for a fascinating watch, is certainly above average in quality, and is absolutely worth watching. What were your thoughts on the show, and what do you think of the state of cosmic horror in media as it currently stands? Let me know down in the comments, and if there are other shows or movies that fans of this show would like, post some suggestions as well. Thanks again for watching, and if you like this video, then send those buttons into the shadow dimension. Have a good one, and take it easy!